Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 Season 27 Wizard build guide. This guide is for the Firebird magic missile build, which is newly buffed thanks to the incredible sanctified power added in Season 27 that makes you cast a whopping 10 magic missiles every time you cast magic missile. This has allowed this new Firebird build to become the best Firebird build of Season 27. And frankly, shooting out bullet hell magic missiles is just tons of fun. The gameplay footage in the background is from pro player Rob, and pro player Chewy will have a written version of this guide on maxroll.gg as we get closer to season launch. In this video, we're going to cover the gear, the skills, and the playstyle that you want to rock this build. And it all begins with the Firebird set. The 2-piece bonus makes your Disintegrate Ray ignite enemies. Because of that, we need to take Disintegrate. That makes them take a bunch of weapon damage per second until they die, but that's not what's important. It's that ignite effect, which will come back at the 6-piece set bonus. Also, when you die, you instead don't die, a meteor falls from the sky, and you are reborn like a phoenix, like a Firebird. Max once per minute though. Then the 4-piece bonus, casting Disintegrate, adds combustion stacks that reduce the cooldown of teleport by 2% per stack. This stacks up to 50 times for a max of 100% cooldown on teleport, therefore infinite teleport. Also, as long as you have any combustion stacks, you gain 80% damage reduction. This is why it's so important when you first enter any level with this build, you start channeling Disintegrate to build up your stacks, build up your defenses and your offenses. Then lastly, the 6-piece bonus. You gain 5,000% increased damage while Ignite is applied to a target. Then, hitting an ignited enemy with a non-channeling fire spell deals Ignite damage multiplied by combustion stacks. Pets cannot trigger this effect. So, this is a very interesting build because the damage that we're applying is not actually coming from a skill. Whether you're using Magic Missile in this case or another skill, it's not the Magic Missile damage that matters. All that matters is the Firebird damage. That means contrary to most other builds where you're looking to buff the damage of a specific skill, what you're looking to do here is simply apply that 6-piece Firebird damage as often as possible. Now this build will be making use of the sanctified magic missile power. This makes magic missile fire 10 missiles and gain the effect of the Seeker rune. So it's 10 target seeking magic missiles. The theme of Season 27 is sanctified items. You're going to find, at some point, an item drop called an Angelic Crucible. This is similar to a Ramalandi's gift. When you take that, you right-click it and you left-click on a piece of gear, any piece of gear, that's going to turn that piece of gear into a sanctified item. What this does is it re-rolls that same item with new stats, and those stats will be primal quality, i.e. maxed ancients. On top of that, it'll give it one of 3 sanctified powers depending on your class, and you can only have one sanctified item equipped at any given time. So you have a 1 in 3 chance upon sanctifying of getting the correct sanctified power that you want for this build, the magic missile one. The best item to sanctify will be one that benefits the most from rolling on its maximum possible range. In our case, that would either be on a convention of elements so that you get that max 200% roll and not the lower end 150. But doing it on a weapon is always a good option because that maximizes your potential damage range on that weapon. And otherwise, getting perfect stats on a piece of jewelry, 100% crit damage, 10% crit chance, 20% fire damage, that is delicious. So on top of wanting to benefit from the 6 pieces of Firebirds, we will also want to work in an Orb of Infinite Depth. This is just a very robust wizard item that is not specific to any particular skill. I mean, it's specific to Explosive Blast, but it's not that it's buffing it. So every time you hit an enemy with Explosive Blast, and therefore you'll want to take Explosive Blast, your damage, your overall damage, is increased by 10%, and your damage reduction is increased by 20% for 6 seconds, stacking up to 4 times for another 80% damage reduction and 40% bonus damage, which will affect our 6-piece Firebird damage. Next, we'll want to take the Fragment of Destiny wand. Your signature spells, like Magic Missile, attack 50% faster and deal triple damage. The triple damage doesn't matter, but that huge attack speed buff does. Next, in our cube, we're going to want the Shame of Delzir. Your signature spells attack 50% faster and restore arcane power. Between these two, right away, we've just doubled our attack speed, and therefore we've doubled the number of magic missiles we're shooting out per second, and therefore we have doubled our damage. Now we'll also want to work in the Captain Crimson set. We're going to equip 2 pieces, the belt and then either the pants or the boots. This drops us down to 5 pieces of Firebirds, so we're going to take in our cube the Ring of Royal Grandeur. Reduces the number of items needed for set bonuses by 1. Then we're taking the Captain Crimson set. 2-piece bonus, gives us life regen, gives us 20% cooldown reduction, gives us 20% resource cost reduction, and then the 3-piece bonus gives us a damage buff based on our cooldown reduction, so more cooldown, more damage, and gives us damage reduction based on amount of resource cost reduction, i.e. we take less damage the more resource cost reduction we have. While neither of these stats are particularly important for this build, resource cost reduction or cooldown, this is just a set that we can work in that provides a substantial buff. Now outside of that, you have some options with your remaining jewelry. We'll recommend the Endless Walk set, the Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose combo. This gives you more damage while you're standing still, and damage reduction while you are moving around. With your other ring, you can then work in a Convention of Elements. This will give you a rotating damage buff. Every 4 seconds it rotates through a different element, so when it's on fire, that's when you especially want to be spamming your enemies. That said, this build isn't hugely rotation dependent. Now we're also going to work in 2 pieces of the Oghilt set, the Shoulders and the Bracers. This reduces our damage taken by 15%, increases our damage dealt by 30%, and the 3-piece bonus reduces damage from elites by 30%, increases damage against elites by 30%. Now, if you're feeling aggressive, if you want to go for more damage, you can actually drop the Traveler's Pledge and Compass Rose. Instead, get the Focus and Restraint rings. Whenever you hit with a primary skill, you gain 50% increased damage for 5 seconds, and when you hit with a resource spending attack, you gain another 50% damage buff. If you go with this, you'll also want to get then a Squirt's Necklace Amulet, another big damage buff. While not taking damage, damage dealt is increased by up to 100%, and damage taken is increased by up to 50%. Now, as a wizard, you have access to shields, and as long as your shield is what's taking damage and not your life pool, then you maintain your Squirt's buff. This setup is more challenging to run, however, because you will be squishier. Now, you'll notice that we have not recommended Mirror Ball. Mirror Ball makes Magic Missile cast 2 extra magic missiles, and those missiles deal 500% increased damage. But remember, it's not Magic Missile that's dealing the damage, and while having 2 extra magic missiles is nice when you're only shooting 1, because it's tripling your missiles, when you're already shooting 10, that's just 2 extra missiles. That just means 20% more damage. When you're giving up either an Orb of Infinite Depth, which is giving you 40% increased damage plus toughness, or you'd be forced to give up one of those additional sets in order to equip the Firebird offhand. It's simply not worth the trade-off. Now, I'll go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear, but first we'll take a look at the skills. So first off, Disintegrate is a must take. This shoots out a wizard beam. We're going to take Chaos Nexus so that while channeling the beam, we become charged with energy and discharge it at nearby enemies. This just lets us zap more enemies at once. This lets us spread our Ignite around a lot easier. Next, we're taking Magic Missile, of course, with the Fire Rune Conflagrate. Next, to go with our Orb of Infinite Depth, we're taking Explosive Blast Chain Reaction. Explosive Blast is on a 6-second cooldown, but Chain Reaction makes it have 3 consecutive explosions instead of 1, allowing us to more easily build our Orb of Infinite Depth stacks. We're going to take Teleport, and remember, we're not going to have a cooldown on Teleport, so we're going to take Safe Passage. For 5 seconds after teleporting, we take 25% less damage, so teleport once every 5 seconds minimum. Then you have some options for the remaining skills. Magic Weapon is an option, Black Hole's an option, Frost Nova is an option. If you are going with Focus and Restraint, i.e. if you are going with a Squirt's Amulet, you need shields, you're gonna take Magic Weapon Deflection. Magic Weapon gives us a 10% damage buff, and Deflection gives us an Absorb shield every time we attack. Otherwise, Black Hole Spell Steal is going to group enemies, but also enemies hit by Black Hole deal 10% reduced damage for 5 seconds, and each enemy hit by Black Hole grants you 3% increased damage for 5 seconds. This can translate into a massive damage buff. So if you're running with a Convention of Elements, you really want to go with Black Hole Spell Steal in order to group up enemies right as you're entering your fire rotation for maximum damage. Then similarly with Frost Nova. Frost Nova is going to freeze enemies. It's a nice crowd control, but we're taking the Bone Chill rune because enemies take 33% more damage while frozen or chilled by Frost Nova. So this can translate into a very nice 1-2 punch. You will pull them in with Black Hole. That groups them together while giving you a massive damage buff. Then you freeze them now that they're all together with Bone Chill, making them take more damage. And then you're in your fire rotation and you unload with the magic missiles. Otherwise, if you're on Focus and Restraint and not Convention of Elements, then it's your choice between being more defensive by taking Frost Nova and thus being able to crowd control enemies, or more offensive with the Spell Steal. For our passives, we're going to take Evocation. This gives us 20% cooldown reduction, and although we're not really cooldown dependent from a perspective of skills, this, thanks to our Captain Crimson's, translates into more damage. We won't be stacking very much cooldown on our gear, so getting it from a passive is an easy way to get a significant damage buff from a passive. We're going to take Unwavering Will. If you stand still for 1.5 seconds, because you are either channeling your Disintegrate or you are spamming magic missiles, you will gain 20% more armor, 20% all resist, 10% more damage. Synergizes nicely with this build. Next, we'll take Elemental Exposure. This will make us deal more damage when we are hitting with multiple different elements. So damaging enemies with Arcane, Cold, Fire, or Lightning will cause them to take 5% more damage from your attacks for 5 seconds. Each different damage type applies a stack, stacking up to 4 times. Elemental damage from your weapon contributes to elemental exposure. In 99% of the times in this game, the elemental damage type of your weapon does not matter. However, for the purposes of this passive, it does. So you will want to ensure that your weapon is dealing a damage type other than fire or arcane. Those are the 2 types of damage that we'll be dealing via our magic missile, fire, via our disintegrate, arcane. Black Hole with Spell Steal also deals arcane. Frost Nova is not dealing damage of its own, so it does not apply elemental exposure stacks. So we'll only be benefiting from 3 stacks of elemental exposure, but that's nonetheless 15% more damage. Next, we'll be taking Audacity. You deal 30% additional damage to enemies within 15 yards. This build, with the playstyle we recommend, will be more in your face. That's because we don't have to always be backtracking and running away from enemies, because time you're spending backing away is time you're spending not attacking. So you will want to keep enemies close to you when you are spamming them with magic missiles. Now, if you're using Squirt's Necklace, you will want to take Galvanizing Ward. You can drop Evocation for this. As long as you have not taken damage in the last 5 seconds, you gain a protective shield that absorbs the next 60% of your life in damage. This really helps to maintain the Squirt's buff. The playstyle is pretty straightforward. We've kind of sprinkled it throughout, but to reiterate, first thing you always do is just channel into the air with Disintegrate, build up your stacks. Then use Teleport Safe Passage once every 5 seconds minimum. Keep that buff up. As soon as there are enemies on screen, you start pop an Explosive Blast every time it's off cooldown, maintain your Orb of Infinite Depth stacks, and then you teleport around if you really want to work with your rotation on your Convention of Elements. If you have one, you really want to be teleporting around and pulling enemies together, herding them together, so that a couple seconds before you are into your fire rotation, you ensure you channel all the way back up to max stacks on Combustion, then you Black Hole to suck enemies in. You will pop them with your Frost Nova if you got it, and then you let those magic missiles fly. Now, as for exactly what you want on every piece of gear, for the shoulders, Intelligence, Vitality, Life, and Cooldown. We don't need a lot of cooldown with this build. It's really just to buff our Captain Crimson's, so we're not going to sacrifice damage for cooldown, but area damage is not applicable to this build. Your 6-piece Firebirds is not benefiting from area damage, therefore we're taking cooldown here. For the helm, Intelligence, Vitality, Crit Chance, Diamond for cooldown. For our amulet, Fire, Crit, Crit. For our gloves, Intelligence, Attack Speed, Crit Chance, Crit Damage. Our chest, Intelligence, Vitality, Life percent. Now for the gems in your chest and pants, if you want more damage, go with topazes. If you want more toughness, get either rubies or emeralds for armor. For bracers, Fire, Intelligence, Vitality, Crit Chance. Belt, Intelligence, Vitality, Life, Armor. pants, intelligence, vitality, armor, boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, all resist. For your rings, attack speed, crit chance, crit damage, and if you have a compass rose, also intelligence. For your weapon, percent damage, increases damage against elites, increases attack speed. For your offhand, you want Firebirds for that 20% damage multiplier, intelligence, crit chance, increased damage versus elites. For legendary gems, you're going to get a Bane of the Trapped, arguably the best gem in the game. This increases the damage against crowd-controlled enemies and emits a crowd-control aura within 15 feet of you, so this pairs extremely well with Audacity. Keep enemies close, you're dealing a bunch more damage to them. We're going to take a Gogok of Swiftness. Gain Swiftness with every attack, increasing your attack speed by 1% and dodge by 2% for 4 seconds, stacking up to 15 times. Gain 1% cooldown reduction per stack of Swiftness. We are spamming attacks super fast. It's going to be very easy to maintain the full 15 stacks here, and that's going to give us 15% increased attack speed. It's going to give us 30% dodge chance and another 15% cooldown reduction. Then lastly, we're going to take a Bane of the Stricken. This is to deal with the Rift Guardians when you are pushing greater rifts and it's taking very long to kill the Rift Guardian. This right off the bat gives us 25% increased damage against Rift Guardians, but also every attack you make against an enemy increases the damage it takes from your attacks by 1%, meaning the more you attack an enemy, the more you gain effectively a damage buff against that enemy. So when you're attacking incredibly quickly, this really builds up those stacks and that damage momentum at a rapid pace. Now, if you're looking to do speed greater rifts and not just pushing, then you can go with a focus and restraint version with a couple additional tweaks. First off, you're going to drop that Bane of the Stricken. You're going to take a Bane of the Powerful instead. If things are dying quicker than you can build up stacks, then it's not worth building up those stacks. If you're looking to do 2-minute runs, 5-minute runs, a Bane of the Powerful is going to last you the duration of the rift. This is going to give you a 20% increased damage bonus for pretty much the entire rift and 15% increased damage against elites. With speeds, you can also choose to sacrifice that 15% damage you get from elemental exposure and instead take dominance. Killing an enemy grants a shield that absorbs 2% of your life in damage for 3 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. This further helps us keep up our Squirt's Necklace. When we're going really fast, blitzing through, we're going to be taking damage now and again because we're not necessarily able to process everything so fast or paying as close attention. This helps us maintain our Squirt's damage buff. For your follower, we're going to go with the Enchantress. You'll want to give her the Smoking Thurible so she doesn't die. And otherwise, the important gear is going to be Nemesis Bracers on her because that emanates to us when we click on shrines. That'll spawn an enemy champion. We want to give her a Flavor of Time that emanates to us. Pylon effects last twice as long. We want to give her an Oculus Ring, chance to create a golden pool on the ground upon killing an enemy. When you stand in it, you can deal up to 85% increased damage. We'll give her Ice Climbers to make her immune to immobilize effects. And then the remaining items aren't nearly as important. However, something new we can recommend for Season 27 is the Guardian set. You gain an additional 100% of your base strength, dexterity, intelligence, and vitality attributes from equipped items. Followers already benefit more from those attributes than we do, and all of the Enchantress's powers scale off of her intelligence. So in addition to that, you're going to want to stack intelligence everywhere you can on her, and gear that's going to increase her attack speed. For her skills, you want to go with Temporal Pulse for its slow, Amplification for the extra fire damage, Powered Shield for the damage reduction and armor, and Focused Mind for the attack speed. For your Paragon points, you're going to max out your move speed. You want to put into Vitality until you get at least 1,000,000 life. This is for survivability and because, especially if you are using any of the variants that utilizes shields, your shields scale off of your life, more powerful shields. Then everything into intelligence. For offense, attack speed, crit chance, crit damage, cooldown reduction. For defense, armor, life percent, all resist, life regeneration. For utility, life per hit, resource cost reduction, pickup radius, and do not put any points into area damage. We don't benefit from area damage, and area damage can cause server lag. So if you're feeling things are getting laggy, check to see if you have any area damage. And that's going to wrap up this build, but again, do stay tuned for the written version on maxroll.gg. We'll link that in the description. It's going to be updated in time for the season launch, a few days in advance. You'll be able to reference that fully with the most up-to-date information. If anything changes in the meta, that will be changed there. If more powerful variants will emerge, that's going to be covered in the written guide. Also, stay tuned for the tier list on the best builds of Season 27. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.